Going into his 4th season, in terms of time spent in the role, Jon Pertwee was now the longest running Doctor. This also marked the show's 10th season, so they decided to open it with an anniversary special, at the 9th anniversary. For this they got back Hartnell and Troughton for the first ever multi-Doctor story. In future this would become a standard practice for anniversary specials, but here it was revolutionary. They were unable to get back Jamie as Fraser Hines was unavailable, and Hartnell could only appear in pre-recorded segments due to his health. This would be his last ever performance before his death in April 1975 at 67 years old. This and other budget constraints had Bob Baker and Dave Martin's original pitch of Death World stripped back a lot. The following year we would get more of an actual anniversary celebration from Radio Times doing photo shoots with almost all of the companions up to that point. But for the 9th anniversary we got the iconic The Three Doctors.
Oh, so you're my replacements. A dandy and a clown.
Unit investigator thing that's zapping things into a black hole. Then these gel guards appear.
Oh, Moses.
And the whole of Unit HQ is zapped through the black hole to a quarry. The Time Lords decide to intervene and send the 2nd and 1st Doctors to help. The logic behind this may be a bit stretched, but it's all worth it just for the Brigadier's reaction.
Oh no.
Oh yes.
Doctor, what the blazes are you doing? Why have you changed your appearance?
And we get to see him and Benton finally enter the TARDIS. Benton had to adopt much of the dialogue that was originally given to Jamie and Mike Yates, so it's nice seeing more of him. It turns out the universe within the black hole is controlled by Omega, the creator of time travel for the Time Lords, who claims he was betrayed by Rassilon and thrown into one of his black holes. Played by Stephen Thorne, his powerful, booming voice and iconic design give him an immense presence. His appearance here alone makes him one of the most remembered villains of the show. The Doctors see him as a godlike figure, the martyr who founded their society, a genius. But now there's nothing left of him but a physical manifestation of his hatred. All he wants is to destroy the Time Lords, but is stuck in this antimatter universe. The Doctors use the still matter recorder to blow up this universe and escape. It's quite a simple story, and the production values could have been better, and it's annoying we never got to see a clear view of Hartnell. We do get this pretty distinctive scene though of the Doctor battling a mental projection of Omega, but it's just a lot of fun seeing the two Doctors running around together. While we're used to this now, this dynamic is just fantastic, and the amount of lore it adds to this show also deserves its place as a cornerstone story. At the end, the Time Lords reward the Doctor by returning his knowledge of time travel and fixing the TARDIS. After 3 years, this allows him and Jo to go back to properly exploring the universe. In their first proper adventure in time and space, the Doctor and Jo find themselves on a 1920s ship. Hey look, there's Ian Marter. But it turns out they're actually inside a zoo, with the inhabitants shrunk down to microscopic size. Robert Holmes was a vegetarian and wrote this story to argue against animals being kept in zoos. It's on the planet Interminor, a grey world with a labouring drone class being oppressed.
But he will be disposed of.
Naturally.
By these guys in bold caps. We see other creatures in the zoo, including an Ogron and a Cyberman. This is the only time a Cyberman appears in the Pertwee era. And the Doctor and Jo break out, exploring the mechanics of the machine and come across the Drashigs. The story is for the most part just a fun runaround, but it certainly explores its themes and characters, such as these two running the illegal exhibit. The Doctor and Jo get out, as do two Drashigs. And the inhabitants of the zoo are released, freeing the crew of the ship from their time loop. Directed by Barry Letts, it has some interesting design work.
It's fascinating. It's like walking around inside a wristwatch.
But it's an engaging script by Holmes and considered to be a favourite by fans. The BBC had wanted to introduce a new arrangement of the theme by Brian Hodgson and Paddy Kingsland. Now popularly known as the Delaware theme, this was not popular with BBC bosses. It was terrible. However, the early cut using this was accidentally sent to Australia, where it was used on Carnival of Monsters Part 2 and Part 5 of Frontier in Space.
They're coming through! Back to the towers, Joe!
Space. The final frontier.
The Doctor and Joe find themselves caught in the build-up to a human draconian war, with both sides accusing the other of attacking their ships. But it's not what they think. It's the Ogrons using a noise to make them appear to be the enemy.
Draconians!
It turns out it's the Master behind this, making people see what they fear. One thing to note is the designs of the Draconians, managing to integrate the actor's face to allow them to display emotion, which Pertwee said made them his favourite to work with. For the most part, this story is just padding, getting captured and escaping, captured and escaping, captured and escaping, but it does manage to achieve a sense of scale and excitement in this political thriller. Scenes such as the Doctor using an oxygen tank to fly through space, or the lunar penal colony, stick in your mind, and Malcolm Hulke clearly had a lot of fun writing for the Ogrons.
That must be them. No other ship would be on a course for Earth at a time like this.
We're on a course for Earth!
Well, naturally, because we're chasing them.
The Draconians are depicted as having a very noble Japanese-inspired culture, and the President of Earth is a woman. That was a statement for the time. And the point that the humans and Draconians only see each other because they fear each other is a great commentary on the tensions in Western Chinese relations, and how we can be blinded by racism. But having them literally called dragons is maybe a bit obvious.
Are these dragons?
No, Draconians. No, dragons is rather an unflattering nickname.
In the end, the Doctor convinces a few humans and Draconians to go on a mission to the Ogrons' planet. Here we find who the Master's been working with, the Daleks. Yeah, they only appear in the latter half of the final episode. This was originally thought of as being a 12-parter, but instead became 2 6-parters with a cliffhanger between. The following, Planet of the Daleks, didn't really address Frontier, so it ends leaving us in the air. Presumably the human-Draconian war is averted, but we don't know what happens to the Master. This would be Roger Delgado's final appearance before he tragically died in a car crash in Turkey in June 1973, at only 55. He never got a proper send-off. Despite its meandering story, this is a well-directed story with good production value, except the Ogron-eating monster. Yeah, they cut out most of its scenes. In the end, the Doctor's injured and uses the TARDIS telepathic circuits to communicate with the Time Lords to follow the Daleks, leading us into Planet of the Daleks.
Well, somewhere on this planet there are 10,000 Daleks.
Whilst Frontier in Space was the story that Ian Levine had bought from the BBC in 1978 that caused them to start preserving episodes, Part 3 of Planet of the Daleks was one of the latest to be wiped, meaning it survives only in black and white. However, using chroma dot recovery mixed with some manual colour restoration in 2009, this episode is now indistinguishable from the others, a truly amazing feat in colour restoration. This was Terry Nation's first contribution in 7 years, since the Daleks' master plan. As such, he thought they were still on individual episode titles, so we get this Part 1 cliffhanger.
Daleks.
Yeah, what's the title of the story again? On the planet Spyrodon, the Doctor's injured, so we get some time seeing Jo acting independently. She gets infected by a plant, meets some Thals, and befriends an invisible guy, the inhabitants of the planet. The Thals are on a mission to find and destroy the Dalek base, and this basically becomes a watered down version of the Daleks, though with much improved production values and not quite so stretched. Whilst at broadcast this would have been fine, looking back it just doesn't feel like anything original, though there are some good sequences such as the parachute escape or the iconic shot of the model Daleks being flooded. This looks much better than the 2019 CGI upgrade. But the only message of this story is a cheap thing about courage.
Courage isn't just a matter of not being frightened, you know. It's being afraid and doing what you have to do anyway.
Towards the end we see this distinct black and gold Supreme Dalek, a stark contrast from the cheaper looking others, and the Doctor and Thals save the day, burying and freezing the Daleks.
Be careful how you tell that story, will you? Don't glamorize it. Don't make war sound like an exciting and thrilling game.
I understand.
Then, for some reason, one of them asks the Doctor if he can marry Jo.
Would you have any objections?
That's what she wants? No.
Well, Jo?
No, I'm sorry, Lighthead.
This is a very weird bit and comes from nowhere, but I guess it leads into the finale. At the end, Jo tells the Doctor she'd like to go home, back to Earth. When the Doctor finally gets to go on his trip to Metebelis 3, it was not what he expected. Jo takes interest in a group of activists in Wales, and after reports of suspicious deaths in a nearby mine, UNIT also join in. On the surface you could say this is an anti-capitalist story, with unsafe working conditions, dumping pollution, and the company being run by a computer called Boss that only cares about the benefit of the company, Global Chemicals. Though deeper, it was supposed to be about how industrial advancement and environmentalism can go hand in hand.
It's time that the world awoke to the alarm bell of pollution instead of sliding down the slippery slopes of...
With the story featuring both hippies and coal miners, both political topics at the time. Though it's not so subtle in saying that Jeremy Thorpe would be the next Prime Minister.
Would you care to administer, Jeremy?
Of course, he never would after assassinating a dog. At the Whole Wheel commune, Jo meets Professor Jones and clumsily ruins his experiment, just like she had when she first met the Doctor. Professor Jones was played by Stuart Bevan, who was engaged to Manning at the time, and so made the perfect love interest, a more human version of the Doctor for her to go away with. Turns out Global Chemicals' chemical dumping is what killed the miners and mutated maggots into these giant creatures. It takes UNIT teaming up with the hippies to defeat them, and Mike Yates and the Doctor have to infiltrate Global Chemicals. That's how we get the Doctor in drag. In the end, Jo announces her engagement, and the Doctor quietly slinks away, driving alone into the dark. This is a rare instance in Classic Who of a companion departure actually having some emotional resonance, and is an iconic scene. We'd seen Jo grow from the klutzy assistant into being strong and independent, ready to move on to her own life and adventures. Katy Manning would have a number of odd roles on film and TV after, but Doctor Who was her biggest work, staying close to the franchise over the decades and famously posing nude with a Dalek. The Green Death is now considered to be an iconic story, even though it doesn't have any alien monsters, just the famous maggots.
I never thought I'd fire in anger at a dratted caterpillar, but...
It is a beloved story that is seen as encapsulating 70s Who, through its being down to earth, its political bent and UNIT being as good as ever. It did have fairly stereotypical depictions of the Welsh and hippies, but its main issue is the atrocious CSO. Fortunately, this doesn't take away from a great, gripping story. Season 10 is quietly one of the most popular seasons of Doctor Who, the season that took Doctor Who back into space and time. It has a number of iconic and beloved stories. Not only can this be seen by its viewership between 6.8 and 11.9 million, averaging 8.9 million viewers, up from the previous 8.3, but a number of times they have been reshown. The Three Doctors and Carnival of Monsters were both shown as part of the Five Faces of Doctor Who on BBC Two in 1981, Planet of the Daleks on BBC One for the 30th anniversary in 1993, and The Green Death on BBC Two in 1994 and 2006 on BBC Four, as well as getting 10.4 million viewers for its Christmas omnibus repeat. Season 10 was clearly when Barry Letts had got production down to a fine art, delivering great value. This would be considered by many as the golden era of Doctor Who. Random stuff being dumped in a quarry in a parallel universe, 2 versions of the same person on the run from a big collared race who control time, who find an isolated founder with a god complex, and made by a Doctor Who writer. Yeah, Loki's a rip-off of the 3 Doctors, isn't it?